The year is 2026. Nicolás Maduro sits alone in a holding cell in Brooklyn. But the handcuffs were not forged by politics or commandos. They were forged by numbers years earlier. This was not just a regime that ran out of luck. It was a nation that drowned in its own wealth, poisoned by oil, inflated by arrogance, and emptied by hunger. Venezuela had more oil than Saudi Arabia, more potential than its neighbors, and more reasons to succeed than to fail. And yet, it collapsed completely. This is not just a story about a man. It is an autopsy of an economy. Venezuela holds the largest proven oil reserves on Earth, over 300 billion barrels. Enough to make every citizen rich. Enough to drive decades of prosperity. Enough to build schools, hospitals, and entire cities from the ground up. But by the time Nicolás Maduro took power in 2013, Venezuela's greatest asset had become its most dangerous liability. The economy had caught a disease. Economists call it Dutch disease, a condition where booming oil exports strengthen a country's currency, making imports cheap and production uncompetitive. Venezuelan farms closed. Factories shut down. Skilled labor faded. Why build when you can simply buy? This model worked as long as oil stayed expensive. For a while, it did. Under Hugo Chavez, oil wealth allowed for massive social spending. But when Maduro inherited the system, the foundation had already begun to rot. Critical staff at PDVSA, the state oil company, had been purged during strikes. Experienced engineers were replaced by political loyalists. Infrastructure crumbled, maintenance stopped, and oil production with no real investment plummeted in 2013. Venezuela pumped nearly 3 million barrels per day. Within 7 years, it fell below 800,000. At one point, it dropped to a low not seen since the 1930s. Maduro did not change direction. Instead of fixing wells, he squeezed them harder. Instead of repairing the machine, he gutted it, turning PDVSA into a personal cash reserve for political survival. What should have been the engine of Latin America's wealth became the first sign of its collapse. Venezuela did not run out of oil. It ran out of a system to extract it. When oil prices crashed in 2014, the government faced a choice: cut spending or find another way to pay the bills. Maduro chose the printing press rather than implement cuts or restructure the economy. He ordered the central bank to print more money, a decision that would unravel everything that followed. In 2013, inflation was already troubling at 56%. By 2015, it exceeded 180%. Then the numbers became meaningless. In 2018, inflation officially reached 130,000%. Some estimates pushed that figure several times higher. Prices doubled within days, then hours. Store owners stopped listing prices because they changed as fast as goods could be stocked. A week's salary could barely buy a loaf of bread. In some cases, families stopped using money altogether, bartering food, supplies, even soap. Cash, once a symbol of stability, became waste. People crafted wallets and purses from Bolivar bills because the paper held more value as material than as currency. Confidence collapsed, and with it, the core of any economy: trust. Trust that a paycheck will matter tomorrow. Trust that savings will be safe. Trust that prices will hold their meaning. Maduro did not just destroy the currency. He shattered the connection between work and worth. Economic war, he claimed. External sabotage, he insisted. But no foreign enemy had touched the printing press. It was an internal error. A refusal to adjust. A denial of financial gravity. The government printed money. And the people paid the price, because once money stopped storing value, it stopped serving its purpose. And an economy without purpose cannot survive. When money failed, the next casualty was food. By 2016, supermarket shelves stood empty. Meat disappeared. Milk became a memory. Basic essentials like flour, rice, and cooking oil were no longer part of everyday life. And hunger, once unimaginable in a nation of natural abundance, became normal. Researchers from a major university-led survey recorded something alarming. In a single year, 3 out of 4 Venezuelans lost weight involuntarily, an average of 19 pounds per person. It was called the Maduro Diet, a cruel joke to hide a brutal truth. But this was not just economic failure. It was policy repurposed as control, instead of reforming markets or reviving production. The government introduced clapboxes, state-issued packages of subsidized food. On paper, they were emergency assistance. In practice, they were political currency. Neighborhoods that aligned with the ruling party received deliveries. Opposition strongholds mysteriously missed them. Criticism was punished with delays. Disloyalty was often met with disappearance from the list, from the supply chain, from the system itself. Worse. These boxes became business. Investigations later revealed that many contracts for imported food were inflated, mismanaged, and in some cases, fraudulent. Inferior goods were delivered as part of backroom deals that enriched government insiders in a nation where children fainted from hunger at school. Profit was carved into every meal. Scarcity was no longer a tragedy. It became a strategy, and trust already broken by inflation fractured further. Because once the right to eat becomes conditional, the line between government and regime disappears. And that is how hunger became a weapon, quiet, slow, and ruthlessly effective. By 2018, Venezuela's collapse was no longer confined to spreadsheets or news reports. It was visible in airports, at border crossings, and on footpaths winding through the Andes. Millions were leaving since 2014. Nearly 8 million Venezuelans, a quarter of the population, have fled the country. It is one of the largest displacement crises in modern history, surpassing all but a few war-torn nations. But the numbers only tell part of the story. Those who left were not just workers. They were Venezuela's human infrastructure doctors, engineers, teachers, oil technicians. Individuals who had the knowledge to keep systems running, hospitals open, machines functioning. In their absence, the foundation began to rot faster. A power outage could not be fixed because the technician was in Colombia. A surgery was canceled because the anesthesiologist was washing dishes in Miami. An entire generation of university graduates became foreign remittance senders, keeping their families alive with monthly money transfers. Maduro lost something far more dangerous than dissent. He lost the ability to fix what was broken. The exodus also broke the illusion of legitimacy. You can claim victory in speeches, but empty classrooms and abandoned hospital wings do not lie. Some left with passports. Others walked for days through dangerous terrain, including the infamous Darien Gap, just to stand a chance at survival. And in leaving, they took with them more than skills or spirit. They carried a message, one louder than protests, one harder to silence. A government can ignore critics, censor journalists, even jail opponents, but it cannot pretend to govern when millions vote with their feet. In March 2019, Venezuela experienced something far more terrifying than a financial collapse. It lost electricity for nearly a week, wide parts of the country, including hospitals. Transportation, water systems, and communications went dark. No lights, no fans, no water, no answers. The Guri Dam, which supplied 80% of the country's power, stopped functioning. The government blamed foreign sabotage, U.S. cyber attacks, conspiracies. But engineers who remained told a simpler story. Failure through neglect, fired technicians had not been replaced. Equipment had rusted. Grass around substations had not been cut, leading to fires. Turbines had not been serviced because the people who knew how to service them were long gone. The blackout was not an accident. It was a deadline. Hospitals had no backup generators. Intensive care units shut down. Dialysis machines went silent. Neonatal incubators cooled. It is impossible to say how many lives were lost in those days, but doctors on the ground described death not by violence, but by silence. The kind that follows when a machine stops running. Water systems dependent on electric pumps also failed. Families gathered at polluted rivers to wash clothes, flush toilets, and find drinking water. The baseline necessities of life, light, clean water, refrigeration, medical care vanished, and once that line is crossed, an economy is no longer broken. It becomes a danger. Maduro's system did not just cost people savings or stability. It cost them hours, days, and lives that can never be returned, because in the end, a state does not collapse when the budget fails. It collapses when the lights go out and never come back on. By 2023, there were whispers of a turnaround. A few restaurants reopened. Imported products returned to store shelves. Instagram accounts showed influencers sipping espresso, talking about a new Venezuela. The government quietly legalized the US dollar, allowing it to flow through the economy after years of publicly denouncing it. Luxury bodegones, high-end grocery stores stocked with imported goods became symbols of revival. Inside were PlayStation consoles, Italian chocolates, and champagne. Outside, people still dug through trash for food. In reality, this was not a recovery. It was a survival mechanism for the ruling class. With oil production at historic lows and the currency nearly worthless, dollars arrived through other channels, remittances sent by the 8 million exiles, small-scale trade, and opaque financial deals. Those with access thrived. Those without starved silently, and beneath it all, nothing had been fixed. The government was not producing goods. The infrastructure remained fragile. Inflation was only under control because spending had collapsed, not because policy had improved. What looked like progress was a two-tier economy. The illusion of normalcy floated on a foundation of ruin. Maduro had bought himself time, but time is not progress. It only delays the collapse of the lie until reality is too loud to ignore. In 2024, the world watched closely. After years of economic isolation and staggering hardship, Venezuela was offered a path forward, a deal that could lift sanctions, reintroduce foreign investment, and resuscitate oil production. The condition was simple: hold a legitimate national election. Polls pointed clearly to the opposition. Edmundo Gonzalez had overwhelming public support. The international community signaled willingness to re-engage. Cautiously, and on July 28, 2024, Maduro had a choice. Option A: accept defeat and step aside, securing amnesty, exile, and perhaps a quiet retirement. Option B: reject the outcome, claim victory, and close Venezuela's last open door. He chose option B. The immediate consequences were predictable. Sanctions returned. International oil companies withdrew. Negotiations froze. Investors vanished, but the real damage was internal by 2025. Senior military officials had begun receiving late payments. The gold trade slowed. The underground economy tightened. Loyalty, once fueled by cash, now had a price the government could no longer afford. The math had shifted. Protecting Maduro no longer benefited them. Removing him opened possibilities, and when protection becomes more costly than betrayal, collapse becomes a matter of timing. That timing arrived on January 3, 2026, but the verdict was rendered long before the arrest. It was signed the day Maduro chose power over peace and sealed the fate of a system already buckling under its own weight. Nicolás Maduro may sit in a prison cell, but Venezuela still sits in the aftermath. What fell was not only a regime, it was trust in currency, in leadership. In the promise of oil wealth that never reached the people who needed it most, an economy can be mismanaged. But this one was betrayed, piece by piece, decision by decision. What remains is not just to rebuild infrastructure, but to rebuild belief that a country can be run without fear, without scarcity, without lies, because the real verdict is not that one man fell. It is that millions were left standing, waiting for something better.